All right. So, as you know, if you go to the Google Drive folder number 2, pre-scene and research, you open that. You open the pre-scene analysis folder. You will notice now that part 1 is not there, but part 1 and 2 both are included. So it's one file. It is basically a combination of the industry analysis and today's discussion on the company and the context. So that is what we are going to look at, part 2. This is your pre-scene document. Last week, we looked at the video gaming industry, and we got a deep understanding of how this industry works, what kind of products do they send out to customers and the market, and we can develop that. Then develop based on that. The second part, which is today's discussion, is on the company, PixelWiz, and the context around this company. So we have a beautiful logo. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to spend the next half an hour, 45 minutes, hopefully, talking about this company. What is the pre-scene telling us about this? And as you can see, just off the chart that you see here, which is the movement of the share price, we are seeing a company that is doing really, really well, aren't we? So we have something at around $9 when they started. And now the share price, it has reached a maximum of around 65. Yeah, maybe, no, $61, around that. Don't assign the numbers specifically, but just know that it's a exponential growth and they've done really well. And this is just during a 5-year time period. So this is a remarkable growth, which has to give us a very positive and strong position. So in your mind, it's your company is doing really, really well from an investor's perception. That's the first idea that you should have when you look at this share price, which 9 to 61 is like that's someone who bought the price or share at about $10 in 2016. Now they are sitting on like $50 return on that share. So that's massive, which is definitely a positive indication that we can take home. On that note, let's start our discussion. Firstly, I want to remind you who you are. The pre-scene is very clear every time. You're a senior manager in PXL's finance function. So I have used the abbreviation PXL, which is Pixel. That's the name I'm going to call the company. It's kind of, a little too hard on the tongue to say PixelWiz, PixelWiz, PixelWiz. We might as well just cut it down. So I'm going to use Pixel here. You're a senior manager in Pixel's finance function. Congratulations on your appointment. I hope you're making millions of dollars. You report directly to the board, and those are important elements. So this is about the strategic thinking perspective I was talking about in our commencement session. You have to think strategically. Why? Because you're writing or you're reporting directly to the board. Think of it like you're a board member, because your thinking has to be at that board level. I told you specifically, board members as opposed to operational level staff, the key difference is that operational staff have to do things right. So they're told things, they have to do them right. But board members have to do the right thing. So that's the key difference. There's a vast gap between those two. The second aspect is you advise on special projects and strategic matters. So if you think about it from an exam perspective, you're going to get 3 questions, and these 3 questions are on special projects and strategic matters. That's it. They are basically summing up the examination to you here. They're just telling you your exam paper is going to be 3 questions where your board member is going to ask you something, and it's in the form of advices on special projects and strategic matters. Now, Pixel is based out of Westland, which is a developed country, okay, has an active and well-regulated stock exchange. Currency is the W dollar, which is the notation that we're going to see. requires companies to prepare their financial statements in accordance with international financial reporting standards. So IFRS compliant. These are the key information pieces that we are learning about the country that we are based in, which is a developed country. Okay, introduction to Pixel. Pixel is a quoted company with a beta of 0.71. So I want to kind of quickly ask a simple question. A beta of 0.71 or a beta of less than 1, can I quickly get a brief 2 words, 3 words description? What does that mean? What does a beta less than 1 mean? That's it. Perfect. This is it. It means that your stock, and we see that, right? We see that in the share price movement. This is a share that is doing really, really well. So the investor perception is that compared to the market, if you invest in an index fund, if you invest in the ASPI, aggregate market, this price, this stock, your stock is doing far better. So the beta is less than 1. Perfect. Pixel is based in Westland with 3 overseas offices outside Westland. So basically presence, physical presence in 4 countries. All the 4 countries with presence have strong video game markets. So that's probably one reason why we have set up operations in those countries, because they have strong video game markets. So just keep that point in your mind and know that your operating or your physical presence is in active markets. The company has 5,100 employees. My goodness, that's a huge number of employees. So this is not a small company by any means. It's a large company, half in Westland, around 2,500 employees in Westland, remainder outside. And Pixel generates revenue through games in multiple ways. We know how generally in the industry money is made. We'll also take a closer look at how Pixel is making its money. So this will sort of act as a summary analysis for you, given that you have already read the precinct. So you will notice that everything is concisely presented to kind of make life easier for you. History. So Pixel was founded in 1986 at a time when ownership of home computers was growing. So home computers, this is the time early Apple, Mac, and Microsoft era. Founders were keen to establish themselves as game developers to supply this new market, obviously, which is probably why they would have gotten into the business in the first place. And since then, they have grown steadily throughout that period. And Pixel has established itself as one of the world's leading game developers. So take pride in that. Humble pride, but pride on the fact that you're working as a senior finance manager for one of the world's leading game developers. And that is good. This is good because when we hear or when we see something like this, it allows us to put ourselves in a frame of mind that really matches that. So even in the research aspect, you will notice the way we think about this industry, we position ourselves from a strong person's point of view, from a strength point of view. Pixel's business model. The business is creating and selling video games. Very simple. We create and we sell video games. We offer a range of games for all major hardware types. So we learned all these major hardware types last week and across all major game types. So we looked at game genres and we looked at game hardware, gaming hardware. So across all of this, we offer games. And Pixel offers the leading games in terms of player numbers and revenues generated in many of those categories. So we have the #1 position in many of the genres across many of the device types. Everything leading to this highlighted element, world's leading game developer. All the games are intended for sale to a global market. Okay, Pixel's game can be installed with different language options for on-screen prompts and for any speech in their soundtrack. So obviously, if you're going global, then you have to have multiple languages to any countries that you're selling: French, German, English, Arabic, Hindi, Malayalam, etc. Pixel's international presence allows the development of new games by each of its hosting focus groups and panel discussions involving local gamers, reflecting the local tastes and preferences in key markets. So you identify the highest demand markets, and then you do focus groups, panel discussions to learn about what the gamers like. This is why we have events like the Comic-Con and the Game Con and the Gaming Awards, etc. So you have these global events which are either held out of Singapore or Korea or America or New York or Los Angeles, hub locations for gamers to just gather. We see that in Colombo here, out of Bangalore in India, etc. London in the UK, where gamers get together and gamers learn about each other, and the developers learn from all of them and incorporate that into their games. So this is our business model. This is how we do things. A key advantage and a key strength that you can take into your SWOT analysis at this point is, so we have some questions. I will definitely take them up. Keep them coming, please. Don't be discouraged that I'm not answering them on point. Just keep the questions coming. I will address all of them. Thank you. One of the key strengths is our presence in 4 countries where demand for video games is high. That has defined our ability to create good best-selling games, popular games, because we operate out of markets where the customer insights and the data and the information, you see, we are talking about, data and information, big data, AI, machine intelligence, blah, blah. So many things can come into this particular scenario. We're talking about that. So that is a key strength for Pixel. All right, let's talk a little bit about the vision, mission, and values. So the vision of Pixel is that Pixel will always be the best game developer in the real and the virtual worlds. Best game developer, no questions asked. All right, that's a very strong vision to have, and a obvious vision also. Pixel exists, this is the mission statement, Pixel exists to attract the talented people who create virtual worlds. So key terms here: talented people to create virtual worlds, enable gamers to immerse themselves in exciting realities. So virtual realities, all right. Pixel creates exciting places to work and to play. So we have multiple stakeholders addressed in this mission statement. They're talking about the people who are working for the company, employees, and also gamers in terms of the customer end. They're talking about the environment or the kind of vibe that they want to create. Brilliant. Core values: imagination, innovation, commitment, and teamwork. So on imagination, Pixel creates the places in which gamers wish to spend their free time, whether settling down for an evening's gameplay or passing the time on a commute to work. So they want to create an environment where gamers would like to spend their time in, and creating an environment so that people would like to come and spend time there is not easy. It takes a lot of imagination. Innovation. Pixel games set trends across the industry because we strive to surprise and excite gamers with every new release. So we have to think about the frequency of new releases also, which is one of the aspects of franchise games that we will later see. On top of that, innovation is critical because people have a short attention span nowadays. I know gamers, 50 hours or 40 hours into a particular game, they haven't completed the mission, but they give up because it's monotonous and there's not a lot of things to explore, and you have the same kind of fights, same kind of challenges, etc. So they just give up. So innovation is very, very important. You keep, even within the same game, you have to have multiple engagements, different types. On top of that, you cannot rely on a particular game's life cycle for so long, because the moment, it's going to start with a comment on Reddit where someone says this game is now boring. And then, some people get attached to it, and then it becomes a thing and people start giving up and they look for the next best thing. So innovation is critical for games. Commitment. Pixel is the place where talented people wish to work, like yourself. Our creative staff are passionate about developing new ideas and leading the way in creating new forms of gameplay. So this is important because you as a finance manager, you're someone who is attached to the financial end of things or the management ends of things. But this is a creative business at its core. Without the creativity, the business won't exist. Now, there's an element of leadership and people skills when it comes to dealing with creative staff, acquiring or retaining, attracting creative staff, retaining creative staff, managing creative staff. So that aspect is something that you will have to keep a keen eye on. Teamwork. Pixel relies on cooperation between all workers across all levels. So across the board cooperation. Games can only be created if there are talented, creative people who can count on the support of the colleagues who manage the space in which they put their talents to work. So teamwork is very, very important and very, very critical. You will notice, let me see. There is a video that I have included, and this is from Ubisoft, which is a very famous game production company where the talent is talking about, you know, their work, how they got attracted to video games. So when you go through the research content, you will be able to hear from them. So it's very important that all these people work in tandem, you know, work in good harmony, because you cannot, because a game is a collection of multitude of things, which we looked at from the industry analysis last time. So only when all of these elements come together, a game functions perfectly. So that's the vision, mission, and values of the company. That brings me to the organizational structure. So we have Westland, Eastland, Southland, and Northland. Three, or rather one head office in the base country, origin country, and 3 offices, regional offices in 3 overseas countries. Let's talk a little bit about these companies or entities. The head office, which is in Westland's Media City, it is the base for all the group's administrative functions. So you're in Westland, you're in Media City. It is the base for the development of PC-based video games. So there are multitude of hardware that games are played on. In Westland's Media City, in the head office is the base for PC-based video game development teams. And it is the base for global marketing. And then we have 3 overseas offices, Northland, Southland, and Eastland. These were acquired individually during expansion to move into new areas of game development. And each office has its own specialism regarding programming for different gaming platforms. For example, when you look at the Northland office, it's a R&D focused office, creation of new and improved game development software. So we learned last time that much like Word or word processing or financial processing, we have these different softwares. For game development also there are softwares. Now Northland is a place where game development software is used, and these software is shared across the company. Heavily engaged in research for new approaches to game development, such as the integration of VR headsets into updated versions of Pixel's PC and console games. So when we look at the companies themselves, a quick summary through the image of the pre-scene, we have the head office, which is the administrative base, home to PC game development, and the base for global marketing strategy, including local marketing in Westland. Excuse me. Eastland is home to mobile game development, smartphone and tablet focused, and it is the base for local marketing for Eastland and that region. Southland is the home to console game development. It's the base for local marketing there. Northland is home to R&D, research and development, and the base for local marketing regionally. That's what we know about the company. So you would have noticed that there's a mention on marketing, and we see this occasionally in some pre-scenes. Not every pre-scene commits a few sentences specifically to marketing. But here we have, because this company has to do a lot of marketing. So when we think about marketing, global strategy and a regional strategy. So the global strategy is developed in the head office, which is responsible for developing global strategies, such as prioritizing different approaches to game development and scheduling the release dates for new games. And all sales are managed by global marketing. So perhaps marketing has a big role to play. You will notice when you browse through the research content, when you read about this industry, you will realize how colorful, how vivid and beautiful it's made to be. And that is because there's a lot of creativity that goes into it, which means that marketing is going to play a big role. And having a central strategy, having a strategy that is coming from a single source, like a global strategy head office that we see here, is always a strength. Can I get a quick company that you know which has a very effective global marketing strategy? One of the best world's most known words, most known brands. Correct. So all of these companies, yes, Apple, McDonald's, agreed, but not the answer I was looking for. Not that these are wrong, but there's one company I'm a little surprised. It's like the first time I've asked this question and I haven't got the answer. The company which has one of the most successful marketing strategies in the world. They're facing challenges these days because of other problems. Recently Cristiano Ronaldo did something with one of their products, and then anyone, what did Ronaldo do? Perfect. Yes, that's the brand. So if you analyze, because I've done case studies on Coca-Cola's branding, so I know that how central and then regionally diluted that marketing strategy is, but they're very, very specific about that. Nowadays, with the whole sugar and all those concerns, but even though you see that the marketing is a little toned down, they're careful. There's no less Coca-Cola being drunk in the world. People are still drinking Coca-Cola as much as they want. And they have one of the best supply chains in the world. So the idea was that back in the day, they had a vision to make sure that a can of Coke or bottle of Coke was in the distance of arm's length of any person in the world. So that was a vision that they had at a time. Because of that, they were able to establish themselves to such an extent that whenever we need a Coca-Cola, you just have to walk the third shop maximum you're going to find a can of Coke. Wow. So regional strategy here, each of the 4 offices is the base for a regional marketing function, which supports global marketing strategy. We saw that in the image also. The regional offices, what do they do? They study local trends from gamers in their respective countries. We talked about it through panels, panel discussions, focus groups, even game demo deployment. So they will collect a few people and they'll give a beta version of the game. Just play it and let us know, which is also another form of focus groups. And surrounding geographical regions also they study. The regional marketing managers can also recommend ways to adapt advertising and other forms of promotional activity to better match the interests of local gamers. Perfect. So pretty obvious and simple stuff. Okay, now we need to talk about something that is very important for us: revenue generation at Pixel. How does Pixel makes its money? There are multiple channels. So one of the key channels is through console games from the manufacturer. So we are talking PS, PlayStation, Nintendo, Xbox, etc. So the manufacturer, what the manufacturer does is that they feature our games in their website. Console games are downloaded through the manufacturer's website. Console manufacturer collects any payments and remits to PXL post commission. So Microsoft will feature our game in their xCloud or whatever platform, or xbox.com. Then if you're a player, you just log in through the internet, download the game. So now it's in your console hard, and then you play the game. So when you downloaded it, you paid $30, or the average price of a game is $59.99. So you pay that. So they retain the commission, they give us the remainder. Payments could be for downloads, gameplay, or in-game purchases. So throughout the gameplay, from the moment you purchase the game to in-game purchases, you have what do you call impressions of sales. Impressions where sales are converted, or user or a gamer is spending money. Pay-to-play basis. So that is online play, which is standalone pay-to-play games and free-to-play games. So today, over the course of the day, I'm going to show you some free-to-play instances. I'm going to give you some sources that you can tap into. I want to remind you that when you go into these websites, don't start playing games, just browse and just have fun observing, maybe spend 10 minutes. Because these are very addictive. Pixel's own website. So not the manufacturer's website. We have our own website, which is hosted by Cloudbo. Cloudbo is a quoted commercial B2B internet services provider. So Cloudbo is like Amazon Web Services, AWS. They host websites. It's one of their services. Provides access to games, which is download and pay to play, play by play, accessible through PCs, laptops, smartphones, tablets, any device that you can connect to the internet through, accessible, and all payments are made directly to PXL or Pixel. We collect payments directly. Physical media. Right, keep those going. Physical media. So we sell cartridges for consoles, you know, those Nintendo cartridges that we just plug in to play Super Mario those days. We sell games through DVD-ROMs. These are manufactured and packaged by third-party specialists in Westland. So it's coming from the origin country. Demand is weak in most developed countries because now they have good internet infrastructure, 5G network, etc., etc. So they connect directly. But there is still viable demand in countries with slow, unreliable internet access. For example, even in Sri Lanka, we currently see with reasonable amount of PCs still available with DVD-ROMs, we see a market for PC games of this format. So these are the main ways we make money. We sell our games through hardware manufacturers' websites. We have online playing games, playable games. We have our own website where users can come into, and we sell physical media. These are the 4 key channels. All right, let's talk a little bit about our sales strategy and how our company has done. So Pixel enjoys strong sales around the world and has many successful titles. Pixel develops and maintains franchises, a range of games that are effectively sequels to a successful original. So one of the world's most prominent game franchises that is EA Games Need for Speed franchise. So they have now, I think, Need for Speed 15 or 18 or whatever going on, 1, 2, 3, 4. They had, that was one of the most successful franchises. EA Sports FIFA franchise, FIFA 2006, FIFA 2010, etc. Assassin's Creed by Ubisoft is a successful game franchise. GTA or Grand Theft Auto from I don't remember the name of the company, my bad, is one of the most successful franchises. Far Cry is one of the most successful franchises in the world. So you see these kind of franchises where you have sequels, part 1, part 2, part 3. I forgot, Call of Duty is one of the most played franchises in the world. So we also seem to be relying on franchises a lot. Pixel's Scratchy Swan MMO, which is a massive multiplayer online, has more than 300 million registered players worldwide, with an average of 800,000 players online and playing the game at any given time during the past year. Averaging at 800,000 players, this is no small feat. So we have one of the, probably the most, these numbers are huge. So we have one of the most successful MMO games in the world. The board constantly reviews Pixel's digital strategy. So digital strategy, important. Digital measurement, digital strategy, digital ecosystem, digital tools, E3. So these are some areas that I would suggest you brush up on to ensure that digital opportunities, another word there, are identified and exploited in order to increase its competitive advantage. Jacob Plunge, Pixel's most successful game franchise to date. So we seem to have even bigger game than Cratchy Swan. This launched as a console-based action game in 2016, rapidly became the best-selling game in 2016. The PC version launched in 2017. So we started with console, then launched in 1 year. PC version, obviously, if it became the best-selling game, no point just keeping it within console. New versions have launched every year since 2018. Presently, the latest version, Jacob Plunge Moonstar, is the biggest single source of revenue for the company. Biggest single source of revenue. So yes, a strength, but also a weakness if we have heavy reliance on one product. Just keep that in your mind as far as revenue dependency is concerned. Earlier versions continue to generate revenues. Still, the Jacob Plunge franchise contributes 19% of Pixel's revenue. So this entire franchise is 1/5 of our total revenue. We are heavily dependent on Jacob Plunge. Key challenge is inability to predict accurately the popularity of new games or the longevity of existing titles. So this is a predicament that normal game developing companies face, because user behavior is very difficult to predict. We never know when someone might feel bored or when a competitor will, because with creativity, what happens is you launch something and sometimes you don't even know it's going to be like, there's this song that is a huge hit these days that is trending all over the world, 200 million or whatever views, that came out of Sri Lanka. This song is one of the small budget, least effort added, very small production, very little, very minute, not maximum effort and money. It would have cost what about few $100 maximum. But now this song has taken the star to stardom, superstardom, global icon, phenomena, etc. So we see with creativity something that is unprecedented today, which is the unexpected might happen. Uncertainty, right? Act of God, call it whatever. But the unexpected happening is something that even games, because sometimes you launch games with high hopes, like what we saw with Cyberpunk 2077 a few months ago. Big hopes, everybody was relying on the game, but the game came out, it wasn't working for many consoles really well. It was only working for the next generation consoles like PlayStation 5, etc. Well, and that kind of didn't play well for the developers. So, we never know. We have high hopes, those might crash. We launch a game, not much effort, but suddenly there might be some small feature that just suddenly goes trending and it becomes overnight. You're adding new servers to your server house because you can't maintain the load of coming from the players. So this inability is a key risk, key threat, key weakness, whatever perspective you want to look at. This is one aspect that game companies have. A note on franchise popularity, like Jacob Plunge. Franchise popularity is due to general player preference to return to a favorite game that includes new settings or exciting new elements, that's switching to an entirely new game. Developers have discovered that it is often more effective to modify and enhance a popular game with additional features than to create a completely new game. So it's really just switching. And we see this with resistance to change, normal E3 theory. We see with people, because when you play the first installment of the game, when you play Need for Speed 1, it's racing, it's good, it looks good, you won all the races, you became the champion. When 2 comes out, you want to play it. You'd rather play that than get into some kind of fighting game or just completely change your style. So with that preference, And as long as there are enough elements in the game to make it interesting, the franchise will continue. And that is a strategy that they are following, that many companies are following. All right. That brings me to Pixel's board of directors. So just a snapshot of the board of directors. We have, one question I'm seeing is, have I sent this lecture sheet earlier? So this is in your pre-scene analysis folder, pre-scene analysis part 1 and 2. That's the file. If you just get this file, what we are looking at now is in that file. That's the file we are looking at currently. All right. So just a quick snapshot on the board of directors. We have the CEO, Ilana Shamir, the Chief Operating Officer, Afifi Al-Akiti, Chief Finance Officer, which is your immediate supervisor, Maria Tektonidou, and Chief Commercial Officer, Ziwu Chen. These are the 4 board members we have, and we have a functional responsibility diagram. For the 4 of them. Then we have 4 non-executive members, including the chair, Jose Sols Lucia, the chairman, Christina Leonova, independent NED, Klaus Koshoke, and Anna Bredstrom. Yeah, right. Apologies for getting the pronunciation wrong, if at all. So what I have done is, you have one table which summarizes everything. So just spending a few minutes on the table. Ilana Shamir joined the company in 1997, is the CEO since 2016, joined as a games producer, and is also responsible for the most successful real-time strategy game at the time. Became the head of product development in 2008 and promoted to COO in 2013, which means long tenure, very experienced, probably a very good pick. Afifi Al-Akiti is in charge of external liaison, which is basically managing third party and other partner manufacturing, selling hardware, console manufacturers, etc. A Cloudbo, all those relationships. And also is in charge of game development and programming. Afifi has a master's degree in software engineering, probably going to be very handy, because end of the day, we are, yes, these softwares that we manufacture or we produce are beautiful, they're good looking, but they are softwares, they are code, computer code. So the person who is in charge of game development and programming, being a master's degree holder in software engineering, is definitely going to be a positive. Multiple company experience as a software developer, brilliant, and was the chief information officer of a major car manufacturer as well. Wow. Okay. Maria Tektonidou, CFO. So this is our reporting line, in charge of the basic things, accounting and finance, treasury. Those are the 2 elements, the slight and buildings management. Maria is an ex-accountant with a manufacturing company. So we see a person who is well versed in accounting, finance and accounting, variety of finance roles, experience with many major companies, was an ex-director of finance at a console manufacturer. So knows the hardware side of things as well. That's probably going to be a very strong point in terms of certain negotiations, etc., because console manufacturers are a key stakeholder for our business. Ziwu Chen, CCO, Chief Commercial Officer since 2008, joined the company in 2015, is in charge of marketing, HR, and PR. So all the people side of things, Ziwu is in charge of, has a background in marketing. Several senior roles in marketing, and joined Pixel as head of global marketing at the head office in Westland. If we'll take a look at the non-executive team, we have the chairman sitting in all the committees: audit, risk, remuneration, and nomination. Christina in 3 committees: risk, remuneration, and nomination. Klaus in audit and risk, Anna in audit, remuneration, and nomination. So the chairman was a successful career, has had a successful career as a lawyer, has specialized in sports management, ex-managing partner of a leading law firm. So all these things with respect to the connection to the law can be a very strong point. You see a lot of chairmen, a lot of people who are in non-executive teams, experts in law. Has served as chair of the Westland Soccer Association as well. So someone who is into sports probably will give a good attitude, a positive attitude to the board with that, with the kind of qualities that a sportsman has. Christina, ex-senior executive and board member in a major television production company. So knows a little bit about, or rather, I don't know to what extent she knows, but she knows about the media side of things. Klaus has served on boards of several tech companies, including a leading smartphone manufacturer like Samsung or Apple. So someone who has the kind of expertise, because we have a key piece of information. If you look at part 1, you realize that smartphone. If you look at global video game revenues by type of device, smartphones take up the maximum or contribute the maximum portion. So in such a context, it is probably good to have someone who has had experience, board level experience with a smartphone manufacturer before as a NED. Anna has had a successful career in banking and finance. Okay, she's sitting in the audit committee. Good. Was a finance director of a major quoted electronics company before retirement. This is the snapshot of the executive team. Now, don't get too hung up on these experience highlights. Having a few key matters, like knowing that knowing that our CEO is an experienced games producer, or knowing that our COO is an experienced software engineer. These things might come in handy just to plug in one of your answers, but nobody has to memorize these experience factors. Just have a good understanding of the composition and the traits of how it is. You don't even have to specifically like remember or memorize. All right, so Christina is sitting in risk and remuneration and nomination, etc. But have a rough idea of how many people are sitting in audit. There are corporate governance elements, like the chairman, is he sitting on, or is he or she sitting on audit committee or not? You have to remember that. So those are the kind of things you have to remember. I warn you, or rather I request you, or rather I'm informing you that you don't have to get too hung up on the specific details. Last week we were looking at mainly the company, Pixel, and the context around which this company is existing. And we do that through the news items, but we looked at all the 6 news items in terms of an analysis, a summary analysis. So you have all the important elements in your summary document, analysis document. But there was one item that we were unable to look at, which we're going to look at now. It's a game review of Pixel called Keppel Quest, which is Pixel's latest MMO, massive multiplayer online game. So I shared a couple of videos on the MMO scene. If you have been able to watch that video, you now have a very deep understanding of what MMOs are. These are games that allow you to explore very large areas, just, like Grand Theft Auto and games like Ghost of Tsushima and God of War. And, they're just so vast. It's almost like walking the earth. Keppel Quest is free to play, but requires online registration, and online cash purchases are encouraged throughout the game experience. So when we look at the information, it's in the form of a review. So it's basically the opinion of people who are playing. This game seems to be widely popular as well. The game's graphics are excellent, and the program's artificial intelligence can match facial expressions and body language to reflect the words being typed in by the player. Wow. So that's like machine intelligence at a very high level. As we type certain words into the chat of the player, the body language and the facial expressions match that. For example, telling a competing character that a proposed deal is insulting really does generate all the implied frowns and tensions across the shoulders. Wow. So it seems to be a pretty advanced game. When we talk about the gameplay, they say players create their own unique characters, all right, and guide them towards the completion of the quest implied by the game's title. Along the way, they must explore several levels, each of which is a self-contained fantasy world. I think it's like the war, like there's a game called War of Worlds or something like that. That's a fantasy MMO. Characters must engage with one another, trading goods and information and forming alliances. So this is about how you play the game. You're engaging with other players, trading goods and information. You form alliances. And players must proceed with caution because there are many dangers in Keppel Quest's virtual world. So the dangers are what makes a game interesting anyway. Moving through the game requires the collection of items and treasure. So there are two notations that are frequently used there called items and treasure. A few items can be found lying on the ground. So as you walk around, you find these items, you collect them. Generally, anything worth having must be traded for the experience points that accrue to characters whenever their players are online. So the more you play, the more experience points you gather. Items generally enhance your skill levels. Treasure must be collected steadily, otherwise the character will be unable to pay to progress through the portal to the next level. So it's really just ensuring that you have the right amount of points or treasure that you need to progress to the next level. For example, a torch makes it easier to explore caves and navigate through darkened tunnels. So without a torch, you're unable to, if the tunnel is the pathway to enter into the next world or level, then without the particular item or set of points, without the necessary information to move on to the next level. Injuries can only be treated by the purchase of a medical kit, which requires spare experience points. So I'm sure that anyone here, I'm sure you have played Mario, which was the global phenomenon on Nintendo. So you know that when you get attacked by all those different bad guys, your health level goes down. Or even one very popular game back in the 90s was called Mortal Kombat, where you have like this red and blue line, which is your health, and it keeps falling. But if you somehow come across a medical kit sort of thing, you can use it, or there are cheat codes, etc. You can use it to get your health back up. So even here, there is something like that. And you can also spend your experience points. So that's like currency in the game. You can spend that and purchase medical kits as well if you need. But you have to kind of balance it out because you need the experience points to move forward in the game also. When characters die, their treasure and any other items that they are carrying are lost, and the player must return to the start of the quest. So that's like a restart of the game. Many players find the game compelling because they become increasingly keen to progress through the various levels and uncover the secrets that will be revealed at the end of the quest. So this is the general design of MMOs, where you enter into you start it's sort of like a story. So you start with an objective, and there's a series of objectives, and the narrative just flows as you move through objective to objective. The story builds up, and your objective gets bigger and better and more tougher. And you just progress, and ultimately there is this sense of like, I know a friend who played God of War. I was just talking to him last week. We were just talking about games because I hadn't played games in a while. I just wanted to catch up. He's a hardcore gamer, and he said he spent about 180 hours altogether playing a game called God of War, which is quite famous these days. So 180 hours to get to the final objective, to reach the final objective, to defeat, I think, the Thunder God or whoever, you know. So, and 180 hours is a remarkable amount of time. I mean, imagine spending 180 hours. When have you spent 180 hours on something? You know, if you had, it's just remarkable, and it's a massive industry because of that. Because players, it's time, end of the day, right? Facebook spends, or rather, Facebook earns directly in proportion to the amount of time users spend on the app. So the more number of users spend, the more hours on the app, on the application, on YouTube or whatever it is, or a game, the more time you can gain from consumers, the more opportunities you have to making money. And that's the business. And they seem to be doing that really well here. These are relatively newer game. They say latest. They use the word latest. So we have to understand that Jacob Plunge is the most successful franchise. There are other games also. So we've been quite successful. And what this indicates overall is the fact that we are a successful company. And there are mentions about how we are ready in terms of risk to ensure, there we go, which is a good point to start the principal risks and mitigation analysis on the pre-scene, which is the next element we're going to look at. Can we abbreviate in the real exam? Yes, you can. Just in the first instance of mention, just put in within brackets, abbreviate, and then use the abbreviation. Not only for the name of this company, for Prantain, the other company, or, you know, FD, SFM, CEO, those generic well-known ones, you don't even have to write the first instance, like CEO, CFO, FD, SFM. Those things you can just use. Any abbreviations you see in the pre-scene, feel free to use them. Beyond that, if you're abbreviating something, abbreviate it in the first instance, feel free to use continuously. So there's one question about the beta factor, just a additional clarification. So the beta is a relative market risk indicator, relative. And what then, if I say it's a relative market risk indicator, how do I explain this? Think of yourself as an investor. You're an investor. So if you're an investor, you have $1 million, you're trying to invest it in stocks. When you're investing in stocks, you have options, you have stocks to purchase, right? That's what you do. So would you like to invest in high risk stocks or low risk stocks? That's one. Risk and return are the two elements investors look at, the risk return trade-off. So risk perspective, you're looking at high risk or low risk. Now beta helps you at that point. If you know the beta of a company, now beta is a relative market risk indicator. So why we use the term relative is because the risk of the, whatever you look at the beta for, of Pixel stock, any stock, Microsoft, Apple, you can derive the beta of any of these companies. That number is in relation to the market. So the entire market, if you invest your money in the entire market evenly, then relative to that, what will happen if you invest your money only in Apple stock? That's the general idea. So if a company has a above one beta, it means that that particular stock is a higher risk stock. That means higher risk, higher the return. So you might make more money, but there's a chance you might not. Higher risk, higher the return. So what happens with stocks above one beta is relative to, when there's a equation that you get it by dividing the correlation with the covariance. But those are the details that we don't need to worry ourselves about. Generally, the understanding is if a stock's beta is more than 1, then investing in that stock is more risky than investing in the market. You never know what will happen. But if there's a stock, like in our case, Pixel, 0.71, it's lower than 1, less than 1. That means investing in that stock is less risky than investing in the average market. That's the basic idea. Now, in the financial strategy revision, segment number 3, I believe, the segment number 3 video, there is a 5 to 10 minute discussion dedicated on the beta factor alone. So if anyone wants to brush up on beta, just take a look at that video. You will have a good understanding of what beta is. Can we say that Pixel's core values are their strength? Core values is a strength, yes. So it is a strength as long as those values are adhered to and they are manifest in the company, that people stick to them. So yes, having a strong set of core values and sticking to those is a strength. Or else you just see companies, a lot of companies in the world, just read their value statements, look at what they are doing. There's a big gap. I've been in situations like that where I literally have thought to myself, I've left companies because of that reason, because what they say that they do and what they do are different. So yes, having a core set of values that they adhere to is a good strength. Are we a manufacturer or a publisher? We are both. We design and develop or manufacture games and we publish them. We sell them. We are both. And yes, Kediswaran's assessment, we do it in terms of software. That's our business. We develop gaming software. Can we perceive core values as equal to critical success factors? The question is, can we perceive core values, the imagination, innovation, as equal to CSFs, critical success factors? Can we? Can I get a yes or a no set from everyone? Can we perceive the core values and identify them as critical success factors? All right. So see, we have two. This is exactly the answer. Both of them together. Kind of. Yes, they can be, but no, they might not be also. That's the answer. I know it's a little weird answer because it's the angle, right? So values, core values, sure. You have imagination, innovation, etc. It depending on your, because CSFs are derived from your objectives. Your vision then trickles down to mission. Then mission breaks down into goals and objectives. And from your goals and objectives, looking at your goals and objectives, you derive your critical success factors. That is, to get to this particular objective, what are the factors I must critically succeed in? That's the way we look at CSFs. So depending on our vision and mission, if imagination, because imagination is a very subjective term, but let's say something like teamwork, or we had innovation. Okay, innovation. If we can decide, or if we determine that innovation is one of the most critical factors for our business to be able to achieve that objective, then what we are doing is we are assigning definitions of the CSF to that particular element, which is innovation. But it just happens to be that innovation is also one of our core values. Okay. So just because innovation is a common term, don't think that it's the same from those angles. Innovation as a value is you're telling people who join the company, look, you have to be innovative people. That's a value that people carry in our company. So if you're not an innovative person, if you like to do, just generic work, if you like a life like that, this might not be the place for you. That's a value perspective. Critical success factor is innovation. You're driving your objective through that. So the outlook is completely different. Another very important element is when it comes to goals and objectives, these are specific and smart. Sorry, these are smart. So M stands for measurable. When it comes to measurable, if you assign CSF, innovation as a CSF, you must be able to derive KPIs, key performance indicators, and measurable KPIs for that CSF. So for any CSF in your company, it's coming from a smart objective, and you have to be able to develop KPIs, which means it's a skill that can help in the SCS as well. Coming up with, now if I ask you, okay, innovation is a CSF, how do you measure it? How do you measure if your company is innovative or not? Tell me 2 KPIs that I can use. So then you'll tell me, you'll think, okay, innovative, how many, the number of new games we release every month. That's a metric. Okay, higher the number of new games you release, maybe that you're more innovative. Or number of updates, like what Facebook does. I don't know what to call that, but they have updates coming every week. Most of them are bug fixes, but they have all these updates. So if they are innovative updates, they're changing the game regularly. So higher the frequency of innovative updates, more innovative the company is. So the outlooks are different, but you can have the same element as a value, also as a CSF. I hope that's clear. Perfect. Yes. So John's comment here, CSF is more specific. Yes, agreed. Right. It's coming from trickling down from goals and objectives. You have to be able to develop KPIs, etc., etc. So that aspect. And values are just a human thing. It's what you want to be. It's how you want to conduct yourself. Lucia sitting in all board committees. Yeah, there is a small concern. Not to the extent that it is a outright breach, because corporate governance is, end of the day, a voluntary code of conduct. It is something that companies volunteer to adapt. And then, if they volunteer to adapt, they have to stick by it. So from that perspective, it is, and depending on the certain details of it, it can be accepted. But these concerns are definitely valid, which we will be talking about. If you remember, one of the activities in the strategic analysis is for you to evaluate the corporate governance position of the company, in which you can comment and you can write everything that you feel is either correct or not in line and not in line with respect to the corporate governance code of the UK. When you apply Pixel's corporate structure to that. All right. So on that note, I do want to take a break